Another in our series on counting the Omer and the Kabbalah. I want to start out with a few general insights and, shall we call them in Hebrew, sikumim, conclusions about the Shira to Omer. It's very helpful, especially now as we approach Shavuot. The Kabbalah and the Arizal, I've read through a lot of the Kavanot. There are pages and pages of Kavanot. You would not imagine how much they've written about this one blessing, this one mitzvah that we do during the Omer. What's really fascinating is the process that we go through in Pesach, the 7-day process of Geulah, from Leil HaSeder to the Shvi'i Shel Pesach. The whole process in Kabbalah is rebuilding the mind and reuniting with the feminine aspect and the male aspect together to reach the completion of a certain intellectual development, if you will, spiritual intellectual. But the Rav writes that even as we drink the 4 cups on the Leil HaSeder and 4 new intellectual powers called mochin enter a person's mind when they're drinking those 4 cups on Leil HaSeder, and that's part of why we feel the elevation of Leil HaSeder. Those lights leave us the next day. The next day, Leil HaSeder is over, the morning, the great lights of the Leil HaSeder leave, and then the rest of Pesach, there is a reintroduction of those lights, and then the whole, they leave an impression in the mind, and then the 7 weeks of the Omer are reintroducing those lights that were first brought into the mind on Pesach and then lost, if you will. They're reintroduced in a more kavua manner, a more fixed way. In other words, they're not going to leave us so fast through the whole 7-week period of counting the Omer. So the 7 weeks of the Omer are really an expansion of the 7 days of Pesach. Or you could reverse the words and say Pesach is a tamtzit, the concentration of the whole 7 weeks of Shira to Omer. So you see that this teaches us something very deep, and you can see it in the physical world, and of course anything that you see in the physical world has its parallel in the spiritual world. What's going on here is like this, that when God creates a light, it needs a vessel. How do you create a vessel? With light that gets thick. Literally, the Kabbalah teaches us that the initial light, of course, is Ein Sof. There's no handle at all. Slowly, through the downchaining of Hishtalshalut Olamot, as the worlds contract, the spiritual light gets thicker until it can hold a more refined light. So what happens? It's similar, if you will, pardon the crudeness of the metaphor, but like a steel shop or a die tool and die shop, where they make a mold to create a tool. Okay, say I need a hammer. I don't have a hammer. How do I need a steel hammer poured from liquid steel. So to do that, I need to make a form first. I make the form in of course, the shape of a hammer. Then we pour the liquid, after the form is made, then we pour the liquid steel into the hammer, let it cool, and we have what we need. Okay, so too in the mind, it's quite fascinating. The original light that Hashem, when we received the light on Leil HaSeder of the great lights of the 4 cups and the eating of matzah and all the other mitzvot of that night, created an impression in the mind. That's like creating a mold, because you have to be able to duplicate in the mold what you want reality to look like afterwards in the form of the hammer. So the original Pesach paradigm of the 7 days is really creating a mold with God's light in order that the whole 7 weeks we reintroduce those lights that left us into a form that already has structure. So you see, it really is like this process of tool making, that we first need a form, which in the mind, which is the whole Pesach, and then the rest of the Omer, we're reintroducing, re-impressing the original lights back into the vessel so they can be held. Because you can receive tremendous amount of light many ways. in Torah, in Tefillah, in good deeds, but without a kli to hold it, it's going to leave you. It's not going to leave the impression. And that impression of our good deeds is what leads us to the next one, and the next one, and the next one. If we did a good deed and afterwards we didn't feel anything from it, who is to say that we would do it again? But I hate to use the simple phrase feeling good, but the idea is that mitzvah gorer and mitzvah, when we introduce the light of a mitzvah into our mind, it'll leave us. The first time I put on tefillin, the second day I might very easily forget. And so too with most mitzvot. So at the beginning, when we're doing a mitzvah, we're engraving that, we're making that mold in our mind for that particular command. And so as we're counting down, today was the 40th day of the Omer, and next Motzi Shabbat will be Hag HaShavuot, Baruch Hashem, Bezrat Hashem. In this process of week after week, we're rebuilding the entire structure of Zah, which is the 7 Sefirot, and each of those 7 have 7. Of course, 7 times 7 is 49. And now we can understand more why we count the way we count. Hesed Shebechesed, Hesed Shebegevura. We count each Sefirah as all 7. And so each light is collecting over this period of time so that by Shavuot we have the full Kli with the full light available to receive the Torah completely and not lose it. And that it would be with us and with our generations to come. So it's an important look at the overall big picture of the Sefirot Omer. We can see why it's so important in Kabbalah, because it's really the production of the Jewish mind, because Pesach is the beginning of the Jewish people. And that national consciousness began when we left Egypt. And of course, they had consciousness that we're from the people of Abraham, and we're from the tribes of Abraham's offspring, and they had this Jewish identity then, but it wasn't the same after leaving Egypt, and then receiving the Torah cemented who we were. Our identity was cemented by the giving of the Torah, that we're no longer just the children of Abraham, and we're no longer just a large family that got very big, leaving one country and going into the desert, but we are the people of the Torah. That is the defining hallmark of who we are. Now, not everybody likes that, and certainly many non-religious people would argue against that. But really, if you look at what defines a person or a nation, it's the same thing. Our self-definition, identity, comes by what I'm committed to. Whatever I'm committed to, that's my identity. Now, a lot of people do a lot of things during the day. People get up in the morning and have breakfast. Are they committed to breakfast? Is that their identity? Not so much, right? Is a person, I work for IBM, so that's my identity. I'm committed to IBM. Well, I'm committed as long as they pay and I can handle the work and they pay well, I'm happy. But those are not deep commitments that form personality, that form identity. Those are external. Everybody, you go to meet somebody new, and the first thing they say is, "So what do you do?" I'm like, that question is such a cliche, and it really doesn't really do service to any human being. What do you do? Well, when? In the morning I get up. What do you do in the morning? What do you do at night? What are you doing for lunch? That question is, of course, it means what do you do for a living? Because that's another way that we identify ourselves. But the giving of the Torah is really the receiving of our identity. And regardless of what level of keeping the Torah you're at, it doesn't really, those fine-tunings of all the different mitzvot of the rabbis and all the different takanot that have been given down, the laws that have been passed down over the centuries and centuries and centuries of poskim, there's literally tens of thousands of halachot. But we're talking about the main ideas of Torah, basically, which are given to us at Har Sinai in the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments is the concentration of everything. And then, of course, those 10 expand like a mountain into all the different details that we have received. So I think it's very useful to remember, that the Shira Omer is really the preparation of having the ability to hold on to the Torah. Because I can learn it, but if I don't remember it, if I don't remember something that doesn't leave an impression behind, then I'm going to be at a loss.